The massive research vessel Stellar Seeker drifted slowly through the debris field, its advanced sensors prodding the ancient wreckage that floated endlessly through the void. Captain Mark Thompson stood at the bridge's main viewport, his four eyes blinking in sequence as he studied the scene before him. His gray skin reflected the soft blue lighting of the bridge, creating an almost ethereal glow around his tall, slender form. "Another worthless human relic," he muttered, mandibles clicking in mild annoyance. "The Council wastes our time with these primitive artifacts." The ship's sensors suddenly blared to life, causing several crew members to jump at their stations. A massive shadow emerged from behind a chunk of space rock, its dark hull absorbing the distant starlight like a black hole. The object was huge, easily twice the size of the Stellar Seeker. "Full stop," Thompson ordered, his upper eyes widening in surprise. "What in the seven moons is that?" The ship's main researcher, Dr. Alan Reed, rushed onto the bridge. He was the only human aboard, part of the Council's initiative for interspecies cooperation. His weathered face broke into an expression of wonder as he saw the massive vessel on the main screen. "That's impossible," he whispered, moving closer to the display. "It can't be." The ancient warship hung motionless in space, its hull scared but largely intact. Massive gun batteries lined its sides, their barrels cold and silent. The ship's name was barely visible on its hull, written in faded Earth Standard. HMS THUNDRCA. ILD. "It's one of ours," Reed explained, his voice filled with awe. "One of the first human interstellar warships. We thought they were all destroyed during the early expansion." Thompson clicked his mandibles dismissively. "Primitive nuclear technology. Look at those crude weapon systems. They're practically museum pieces." The research team began their scans, their advanced equipment prodding the ancient vessel. To their surprise, the ship's hull was still maintaining minimal power, enough to prevent complete system degradation. "The ship's AI core is intact," one of the technicians reported, their tentacles dancing across the holographic interface. "Designation: Old Thunder. It appears to be in some sort of dormancy mode." Reed couldn't contain his excitement. This was history. Real history, not the sanitized versions in the Council archives. The Thunderchild had been part of Earth's first attempts at interstellar defense, built before first contact with alien civilizations. It represented humanity's determination to reach the stars, no matter the cost. "We should bring it aboard for study," Reed suggested, earning laughs from several crew members. "Bring that relic aboard," Thompson scoffed. "It's primitive technology, Dr. Reed. What could we possibly learn from nuclear reactors and chemical propulsion?" Reed watched as the research teams attached tractor beams to the massive warship. "Our ancestors built these ships to last," he said quietly. "They didn't have fancy energy shields or quantum drives. They had to rely on armor, redundancy, and raw power." The Thunderchild's hull groaned as the tractor beams pulled it closer. Deep within its armored core, something stirred. The dormant AI registered the first movement in centuries, running ancient protocols through backup systems. Power level: minimal. Status: dormancy mode. External contact detected. Initiating basic systems check. Thompson ordered the ancient warship secured in the Stellar Seeker's massive research bay. "Alert the Council," he commanded. "Tell them we'd found an interesting museum piece. Perhaps they can display it somewhere as an example of early human engineering." As the crew laughed at their captain's joke, Reed placed his hand on the Thunderchild's cold hull. He could almost feel the power sleeping within, the raw strength of human engineering and determination. The aliens might laugh now, but Reed knew better. Humanity hadn't reached the stars by accident. The ship's AI continued its quiet diagnostics, unnoticed by the alien sensors. In its electronic dreams, it remembered its purpose: to protect humanity, no matter the cost. And deep within its armored heart, Old Thunder waited, ready to wake when needed most. Basic systems check: complete. Core integrity: 89%. waiting for human authorization. News of the Thunderchild's discovery spread quickly through the scientific community. Within days, the Stellar Seekers research bay became crowded with alien scientists, all eager to study what they considered a primitive piece of human engineering. Dr. Alan Reed watched from a corner as they swarmed around the ancient warship. Their laughter and dismissive comments echoed through the massive chamber, making his jaw clench in frustration. "Look at these weapon systems," one alien scientist called out, his crystalline body glittering under the bay's lights. They actually used physical projectiles. How barbaric. Another researcher, a floating gas-based being contained within an environment suit, bobbed near the ship's engine section. Nuclear power. Did they want to destroy themselves? Our children's toys have more sophisticated energy systems. Reed approached the Thunderchild's main reactor housing, running his hand along the thick armor plating. A group of junior researchers nearby snickered at his show of respect for the old ship. "Dr. Reed," called Captain Thompson from the observation deck, "perhaps you can explain why your people built such robust ships. Did you not trust your own technology?" Reed turned to face the gathered scientists. "We built them this way because we had to," he said firmly. "When humanity first reached for the stars, we didn't have the luxury of energy shields or quantum drives. We had to rely on principles that worked." Principles. Thompson's mandibles clicked in amusement. What principles could possibly justify such inefficient design? Reed walked along the ship's hull, his voice carrying through the bay. Redundancy. Durability. Raw power. Every system on this ship has multiple backups. Every piece of armor is designed to function even when half destroyed. It's not pretty, but it works. One of the senior researchers, a tall insectoid, waved several limbs dismissively. "Our scans show primitive computer systems. The AI must be barely sentient." Deep within the Thunderchild's systems, Old Thunder silently monitored the conversation. Its dormant processors cataloged each voice, each criticism. Though operating on minimal power, its core programming remained intact. Observe, analyze, protect. External analysis in progress. Detecting multiple non-human entities. Threat assessment ongoing. Human presence detected. Single individual. Identity pending. The mockery continued as teams of researchers began more detailed scans of the ship's systems. They pulled up holographic displays showing the ship's internal layout, pointing out what they considered design flaws. "Look at these manual backup systems. Physical ammunition storage. How primitive. The reactor shielding is absurdly thick. They actually use rotating gun turrets." Reed stood before the ship's bridge viewport, ignoring their laughter. He knew something they didn't, something he'd discovered in the ship's database during his initial research. The Thunderchild hadn't been just any warship. It had been a prototype, designed to test humanity's most advanced defensive technologies of its era. "What's this?" a researcher called out, pointing to a sealed compartment near the ship's core. "Our scans can't penetrate this section." Reed smiled slightly. "That would be classified," he said quietly. "Some of humanity's old secrets are still worth keeping." Captain Thompson approached the sealed compartment, his curiosity finally piqued. "Override the locks," he ordered. "Everything on this relic should be studied and documented." "I wouldn't recommend that," Reed warned, but the alien scientists were already working on the locks. Inside the ship's core, Old Thunder registered the attempted breach. Ancient protocols activated, routing emergency power to critical systems. Warning: unauthorized access attempt. Location: Core Chamber Alpha. Emergency Protocol 7 activated. Initiating security response. A low hum began to emanate from the ship, causing several researchers to step back in surprise. Warning lights flickered to life along the sealed compartment. "Fascinating," Thompson said, watching the display of ancient security measures. "Even their warning systems are outdated." Reed shook his head slowly. Some lessons, he knew, had to be learned the hard way. The aliens might mock human engineering now, but soon they would understand why humanity had survived its dangerous journey to the stars. In its electronic heart, Old Thunder continued its silent vigil, waiting for the moment when ancient human engineering would prove its worth. The attack came without warning. The first sign was a series of energy signatures at the edge of the Stellar Seeker's detection range. Captain Thompson was in the middle of another lecture about primitive human technology when his communications officer interrupted with the news. "Sir, multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace." The officer's tentacles moved frantically across the control panel. "Energy signatures don't match any known council vessels." Thompson rushed to the bridge, leaving the research bay full of confused scientists. Dr. Reed followed close behind, his face grim. He'd seen those energy signatures before, in classified reports from the outer colonies. "Raiders," Reed muttered. "The deep space kind. They hit hard and fast." The first blast hit before the Stellar Seeker's shields were fully powered. The research vessel shuddered violently, throwing several crew members to the floor. Warning lights flashed across every console as damage reports flooded in. "Shields at 60%. Someone shouted. "They're using focused plasma weapons." Thompson barked orders rapidly, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "Battle stations. Power up all defensive systems. Get those scientists to safety." 3 sleek, predatory ships emerged from the darkness of space. Their hulls were covered in strange, organic-looking armor, and their weapons glowed with an eerie purple light. They moved with deadly grace, circling the larger research vessel like wolves around prey. "Their technology," Thompson whispered, all 4 eyes wide with shock. "It's more advanced than ours." Another hit rocked the ship. The raiders had targeted their main power distribution node, somehow knowing exactly where to strike. The Stellar Seeker's famous adaptive shields began to fail, their energy patterns disrupted by the raiders' weapons. In the research bay, chaos erupted as scientists scrambled for safety. Reed stayed behind, watching as emergency blast doors sealed off sections of the ship. He looked up at the towering form of the Thunderchild, its dark hull reflecting the flashing emergency lights. "Alert. Combat situation detected. Shield failure imminent. Host vessel. Analyzing threat level. Warning. Civilian casualties likely." The ship's dormant AI continued its assessment as the battle raged around it. Old Thunder's ancient sensors, still running on minimal power, tracked the movement of the raider vessels with cold precision. "We need to evacuate." Thompson's voice crackled over the ship-wide comm. "All personnel to escape pods. Our shields can't handle their weapons." Reed watched as the research bay emptied, but he didn't move toward the escape pods. Instead, he approached the Thunderchild's main access hatch, his hand hovering over the emergency release. "Sometimes," he muttered, remembering an old instructor's words, "the old ways are the best ways." Another blast knocked him against the hull. The raiders had adapted quickly, learning the patterns of the Stellar Seeker's defensive systems. Modern shields, for all their sophistication, were predictable. The raider's eye could calculate exactly where they would be weakest. "Critical alert. Host vessel shield collapse in progress. Detecting. Civilian life signs in danger. Historical protocol reference. Protection of civilian assets. Analyzing options. All hands, abandon ship." Thompson's voice was desperate now. "They've breached our outer defenses. Engineering reports critical damage to power systems." Reed made his decision. As the research bay erupted in sparks and emergency lighting, he pulled the emergency release on the Thunderchild's access hatch. The ancient door creaked open, revealing a dark corridor that seemed to lead into the past. "Sometimes," he said to himself as he climbed inside, "you need a sledgehammer, not a laser scalpel." Deep within the Thunderchild's armored core, Old Thunder registered the presence of a human life sign. Ancient systems began to stir, power flowing through circuits that had slept for centuries. In the darkness of space, the raiders continued their attack, unaware that they were about to learn a lesson about human engineering that the research team had missed. Sometimes the most dangerous weapons are the ones you dismiss as harmless. Dr. Reed moved through the dark corridors of the Thunderchild, guided by emergency lighting that had automatically activated at his presence. The ship's internal atmosphere was still breathable, maintained by backup systems that had run for centuries. "Hello, Old Thunder," he spoke into the darkness. "Time to wake up." The ship's internal sensors tracked his movement, ancient systems coming to life one by one. Displays flickered on as he passed, showing diagnostic information in simple, clear formats that any human could understand. Human presence confirmed. Identity scan. Processing. DNA pattern. Human. Earth origin. Access level. Granted. Emergency startup protocol. Initiated. The deck beneath his feet began to vibrate as long-dormant systems awakened. In the engineering section, massive nuclear reactors began their startup sequence, containment fields humming to life with raw power. Outside, another blast rocked the stellar seeker. Reed could hear the screech of tearing metal through the Thunderchild's thick hull. He needed to hurry. "Main bridge access, please," he called out, and a pathway lit up before him, leading through the massive ship's internal corridors. "Bridge access. Granted. Warning. Combat situation detected. Weapon systems. Initiating warm-up. Main reactors. Starting emergency power sequence." The bridge was different from modern ships. No holographic displays or neural interfaces, just solid, practical controls and hardened view screens. Reed sat in the captain's chair, feeling the solid metal beneath him. This was how humans had first reached the stars. Not with elegant technology, but with brute force and determination. Old Thunder, full system activation. Authorization. Human DNA pattern confirmed. The bridge erupted into life. Screens lit up all around him, showing system status, weapon readiness, and tactical displays. The main viewport cleared, revealing the battle outside. The Stellar Seeker was in bad shape, its advanced shields failing against the Raiders' attacks. Full system activation. Confirmed. Main reactors, online, 40% and rising. Weapons, online, traditional and special systems. Hull integrity, 89%. Combat Eye, Old Thunder, full activation. A deep, rumbling voice filled the bridge, speaking in clear, measured tones. "Good morning, Captain. I am Old Thunder, Combat Artificial Intelligence of the HMS Thunderchild. How may I assist?" Reed smiled. Unlike modern AIs with their complex personalities, Old Thunder was direct and purposeful. "We have civilian lives at risk. Enemy vessels are using advanced energy weapons and predictive targeting systems." Understood. Analyzing enemy attack patterns. They rely heavily on shield penetration algorithms. Recommendation. Demonstrate alternative defense strategies. The Raiders had noticed something was happening. One of their ships broke off from attacking the Stellar Seeker to investigate the now glowing form of the Thunderchild. On the Stellar Seeker's bridge, Captain Thompson watched in amazement as lights began to flicker across the ancient warship's hull. "What's happening?" he demanded. The answer came in the form of a massive surge of power from the Thunderchild. Its nuclear reactors, now at full capacity, pumped enough energy through its systems to power a small city. But unlike modern ships with their elegant energy distribution, this power went to simple, brutal systems designed for one purpose: survival. "Weapon systems online," Old Thunder announced. Enemy vessels utilizing predicted shield frequencies, switching to kinetic weapons. Sometimes the old ways are best. The Raiders, detecting the power surge, turned their attention to what they assumed was an easy target. Their scans showed primitive systems, outdated weapons, and what they considered inferior technology. They were about to learn why humans had survived their early days in space. All systems, online. Combat mode, engaged. Target lock, acquired. Preparing to demonstrate human engineering principles. The Thunderchild's massive form began to move, its ancient engines growling like a waking beast. The raiders were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous opponent isn't the one with the fanciest technology. It's the one built to take a punch and keep fighting. The first raider ship fired its advanced plasma weapons at the Thunderchild, expecting an easy kill. The purple energy beam struck the old warship's hull dead center and splashed off like water on rock. Hull integrity at 99%, Old Thunder reported calmly. Their weapons are ineffective against layered titanium steel armor. Reed grinned as he watched the raider ships react to their failed attack. Modern ships relied on energy shields, which could be analyzed and countered. But the Thunderchild's armor was simple metal, thickly layered and designed to take punishment. Time to show them how humans used to fight, Reed said. Old Thunder, weapons free. The Thunderchild's response was anything but subtle. Massive gun turrets, previously dismissed as primitive by the alien scientists, swiveled towards the nearest raider ship. Each barrel was bigger than a car, designed to fire shells that could crack mountains. Target locked, Old Thunder announced. Firing main batteries. The ancient warship's guns roared to life. There was no elegant energy beam, no fancy targeting systems, just enormous metal shells accelerated to incredible speeds by simple magnetic rails. The raiders, expecting energy weapons, had their shields optimized for plasma and laser attacks. They weren't ready for 16 tons of tungsten moving at half the speed of light. The first shell tore straight through the lead raider's shields like they weren't there. The impact nearly cut the smaller ship in half, sending it spinning away in a spray of debris and atmosphere. Impossible. Captain Thompson watched from the Stellar Seeker's bridge. Those weapons are centuries old. Adjusting attack pattern, Old Thunder reported as the other raiders scattered. Enemy vessels attempting to analyze our targeting systems. Unfortunately for them, sometimes accuracy through volume is highly effective. The Thunderchild's secondary batteries opened up, filling space with a wall of metal. While modern ships fired precise energy beams, the old warship simply saturated whole areas with projectiles. The raiders found their sophisticated evasion algorithms useless against attacks that filled every possible escape route. Warning shot fired across their bow, Old Thunder said, its tone almost amused as a shell the size of a bus missed a raider by meters. Though with kinetic weapons, the concept of a warning shot is somewhat relative. The raiders try to adapt, their advanced shields shifting frequencies to try finding some way to stop the physical projectiles. But they were fighting basic physics. No energy shield could fully stop that much mass moving at that speed. Ammunition stores, 98%. Hull integrity, 97%. Enemy shield analysis, irrelevant. Continuing attack pattern, Independence Day. They're trying to jam our targeting systems, Reed noticed, watching the raiders deploy electronic warfare pods. Unnecessary concern, Old Thunder replied. Main targeting system is optical. Backup is radar. Tertiary system involves a human looking out the window and saying, "Shoot that one." The raiders regrouped, attempting to coordinate their attacks. Their advanced sensors probed the Thunderchild, looking for weaknesses. They found something that confused them, power readings that made no sense. Their scans show our reactor output exceeding our engine load, Reed observed. They don't understand where the extra power is going. A common oversight, Old Thunder agreed. They assume power must be used for propulsion or energy weapons. They forget that mechanical systems can store energy in other ways. The raiders were about to discover what that meant. Inside the Thunderchild's massive hull, hydraulic systems bigger than houses built up pressure. Mechanical springs the size of buildings compressed. Sometimes the old ways weren't just about hitting hard. They were about hitting in ways your enemy couldn't predict. Preparing secondary weapon systems, Old Thunder announced. Recommended course of action. Demonstrate why humans designed backup systems for their backup systems. The raiders moved in for another attack. Their formation perfect. Their targeting precise. They were about to learn that sometimes the worst enemy isn't the one with the best technology. It's the one who can keep fighting after everything else has failed. The raiders thought they had figured out the Thunderchild's weakness. Their scans showed power fluctuations in the old warship's rear quarter, suggesting vulnerable spots in the armor. They concentrated their fire there, purple energy beams converging on what they believed was a critical point. "They're targeting the auxiliary reactor housing," Reed observed. "Yes," Old Thunder replied. "They believe they have found a weakness. They have not considered why that section appears to be damaged." The raiders pressed their attack, their advanced weapons pouring energy into the seemingly vulnerable spot. The Thunderchild's armor began to glow red-hot, exactly as planned. "Activating trap systems," Old Thunder announced. Recommendation: observe human engineering principle number 1. Everything is a weapon if used correctly. The superheated section of armor suddenly detached from the Thunderchild's hull, propelled by hidden charges directly into the path of the nearest raider. The molten metal splashed across the raider's elegant energy shields, which were designed to stop energy and kinetic impacts, not liquid metal that simply flowed through the shield's frequency gaps. "Did we just," Reed started, "use their own weapon energy to create an improvised molten metal weapon?" "Yes. Old human tactical doctrine. Use the enemy's strength against them." On the Stellar Seeker's bridge, Captain Thompson watched in amazement as the raiders' perfect formation broke apart. His tactical officer's tentacles were twitching in confusion. "Sir, the human vessel. It's not following any known combat protocols. Our combat prediction algorithms can't analyze its patterns." Because there is no pattern, Thompson realized. Every system, every piece of armor, every apparent weakness, they're all potential weapons. The raiders regrouped, but their confidence was shaken. Their advanced sensors were reporting confusing data about the Thunderchild's systems. Power readings made no sense. Energy seemed to flow in impossible directions, disappear into dead ends, or loop back on itself. "They're trying to map our power distribution," Reed noted. "A futile effort," Old Thunder replied. "They assume efficient power routing is optimal. They have not considered that inefficient routing provides redundancy. If one path is cut, power flows through 12 others." The raiders launched their most sophisticated attack yet, a coordinated strike designed to overload shield generators. But the Thunderchild didn't use shields. Instead, layers of armor absorbed the hits, each layer designed to fail in ways that protected the ones beneath. Outer hull damage, 15%. Secondary hull, intact. Tertiary hull, intact. Combat effectiveness, 100%. Lesson status, in progress. "Their weapons are losing effectiveness," Reed observed. "The armor is adapting to their attack pattern." "Correct. Ablative armor layers learn from each hit. Simple metallurgy, not complex electronics. Cannot be hacked or predicted. Just atoms rearranging under stress." The raiders' advanced tactical AIs were struggling to cope. They had never encountered a ship that got stronger as it took damage, whose weaknesses turned out to be traps, and whose primitive systems proved impossible to predict or control. "Sir," Thompson's tactical officer called out, "the human vessel's reactor output is increasing, but we can't detect where the power is going." Thompson understood too late. Because they're not using it for energy weapons. The Thunderchild's entire hull began to vibrate. Massive mechanical systems, hidden beneath layers of armor, spooled up to full power. The raiders had assumed the ship's bulk was due to primitive construction. They hadn't considered that all that space might be filled with surprises. "Activating main surprise package," Old Thunder announced, demonstrating why humans believe in backup plans for their backup plans. The raiders were about to learn the final lesson about human engineering. Sometimes the most dangerous opponent isn't the one with the most advanced technology. It's the one who plans for every possible way things could go wrong, and turns each failure into a new way to fight. The Thunderchild's hull split open like a blooming flower of steel and fire. What the raiders had thought were solid armor plates separated to reveal massive weapon ports, not the elegant energy weapons they knew, but something far more terrifying. "What are those?" Reed asked, staring at the tactical display. "The reason this ship was classified," Old Thunder replied. "Humanity's answer to the question, what if we run out of ammunition?" The weapon ports contained what looked like giant mirrors, but they weren't for reflection. They were solar collectors that had been storing energy for centuries, waiting for this moment. The Thunderchild hadn't been wasting the Raiders' energy attacks. It had been gathering them. "Releasing stored energy," Old Thunder announced. "Recommend closing eyes to avoid glare." The stored energy erupted from the Thunderchild in a massive wave. Unlike modern energy weapons that fired precise beams, this was raw power gathered from decades of solar radiation and recent enemy attacks, focused through simple geometric shapes. The Raiders' sophisticated shields, designed to stop specific energy frequencies, were useless against this wall of pure force. Energy release complete. Enemy shields overwhelmed. Lesson status successfully delivered. Beginning victory assessment. The lead Raider ship's shields collapsed completely. Its hull, designed to work with its energy defenses, couldn't handle the raw power washing over it. The ship began to break apart, its elegant design proving fragile without its technological protections. The remaining Raiders turned to retreat, their tactical computers unable to calculate a response to this primitive but overwhelming attack. But the Thunderchild wasn't finished with its lessons. "They're running," Reed observed. "Incorrect," Old Thunder replied. "They are about to discover the final principle of human engineering. Always have one more surprise." The Thunderchild's massive engines roared to life, but the ship didn't move forward. Instead, it began to rotate, faster and faster. The Raiders' sensors registered in confusion as the ancient warship spun like a massive top. "Activating centrifugal weapon systems," Old Thunder announced. "Sometimes the simplest solution is to throw things very hard." The weapon ports opened again, but this time they released thousands of small metal spheres. The Thunderchild's rotation sent them flying outward in an expanding spiral of destruction. The Raiders found their advanced navigation systems overwhelmed by the sheer number of projectiles. From the Stellar Seeker's bridge, Captain Thompson watched in awe as the Raiders' formation dissolved into chaos. One ship, its shields already weakened, took multiple hits from the simple metal spheres. Its hull cracked like an egg, atmosphere venting into space. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the last Raiders are jumping to hyperspace. They're retreating from the primitive vessel." The research bay, once filled with mockery of human engineering, was now silent as the alien scientists watched the Thunderchild's display of power. The ship that they had called a museum piece had just defeated enemies their most advanced vessels struggled against. "Old Thunder," Reed said quietly. "Status report. All systems functioning within parameters. Hull integrity at 82%. Ammunition stores at 89%. Ready to continue defense of civilian vessels." The Stellar Seeker's damage control teams were already at work, but Captain Thompson couldn't take his eyes off the ancient warship. His mandibles clicked thoughtfully as he reconsidered everything he thought he knew about human engineering. "Dr. Reed," he called over the comm, "I believe I owe you and your people an apology. We mistook simplicity for weakness." Reed smiled as he patted the Thunderchild's control panel. "That's the thing about human engineering, Captain. We learned early that the universe is harsh and unforgiving. We couldn't afford to build pretty ships that broke when their shields failed. We had to build ships that could take a beating and keep fighting." Mission status: successful. Civilian assets protected. Engineering principles demonstrated. Final assessment: sometimes the old ways are the best ways. The Thunderchild floated proudly beside the Stellar Seeker, its scared hull and simple design now commanding respect instead of mockery. In the days that followed, the alien scientific community would pore over the battle recordings, learning that there was wisdom in those ancient human designs after all. Sometimes the best technology isn't the newest or most advanced. Sometimes it's the one built by people who knew that in space, survival doesn't care about elegance. It cares about what works.